This is Season 4 of Southpaw Deep Space Nine. Season 5 will be released on the Southpaw Pod Patreon. This episode was recorded on April 16, 2024. We are back with Southpaw Deep Space Nine, Season 4. If you don't know what SDS9 is, it's Southpaw's completest DS9 watch-along show, where we watch every episode, recap it, and analyze it. We are your hosts, Scott and Sam. Scott is someone who's watched DS9 more than once, whereas I'm someone who's casually watched some episodes when it first aired. But this is my first time watching each episode in earnest, or watching each episode while paying attention. One of the cool things about this is that it also gives us different perspectives. After we watch each episode, we come together and talk about it. Scott gives us the play-by-play along with his insights, while I analyze scenes that stuck out for me from a political perspective or a media studies perspective. But before we discuss today's episode, I want to bring the listeners' attention to a YouTube video by Jesse Gender titled, "When Your Favorite Creator Turns Out to Be Pro-Israel." It talks a lot about DS9, its flaws, like its Americanism, which we talk a lot about here, but also what makes it good. It's a personal video essay from a Trekkie about what the show has meant to this creator and their disappointment in Ira Stephen Bear for supporting Israel and denouncing Jonathan Glazer's milquetoast Oscar speech on Gaza, which was really a very centrist message, but even that was too much for some in Hollywood. I don't feel any sort of way about Bear's Zionism because he was never a hero of mine. But for longtime fans of DS9, this video will probably resonate. But since I have no emotional or childhood attachment to this show, I definitely am not going to hold back when I see stuff I want to call out. I can't speak to Jesse Gender's body of work. I've only seen this video, so don't take this as an endorsement or even as me saying I love every part of the video. I would have gone way harder. But it's all context since this is deeply personal to the creator, and they also have a large fan base, much larger than ours, which means all sorts of political alignments. So the message has to be crafted with that in mind. I'm just suggesting this video, especially for longtime fans. In today's episode of Southpaw Deep Space Nine, we are discussing Indiscretion. Scott, can you tell us about this episode?
Well, right now I want to tell you about why Jonathan Glazer's movie Zone of Interest is kind of bullshit, and it was a super mid speech that people are losing their minds over. But yes, we will talk about Indiscretion, even though I'm not very discreet. A person named Raska Karn comes to talk to Kira. Raska has picked up a lead on the Ravenok. He is in the Badlands, the No Man's DMZ during the peace run by the Maquis. We've seen it a few times in the past. The Ravenok is a Cardassian warship that may still be around. Warship, prison ship, I'm sure we'll learn more about it later. 6 years before Deep Space Nine, the Ravenok was a prisoner Cardassian ship that went missing, and Debris has been found. Lord Akram, who was on the ship, was Kira's friend, who disappeared. And Kira's talking to Odo, and we're presuming that Odo's going to tell her not to do it. But Odo's like, good luck. Go off, King. Sisko asks that someone come with Kira to find the Ravenok, the new Cardassian civilian government, which is developed at the beginning of season 4 due to the attack by the Klingons of the Cardassian space, thinking that the Cardassians are part of the Dominion. They have asked to cooperate. Sisko asks for diplomacy. Kira agrees, but decides that the Cardassians have 2 days and a little change to come to Deep Space Nine for the mission. Dax and Sisko talk. Cassidy and Sisko are heating up, and Cassidy was supposed to leave on a trip, but it looks that she might switch to working on a Bajoran freighter. As you know, she's like a freight captain. That's her jam. And her and Sisko, Ben have started dating a few episodes ago. And Jadzia invites Cassidy to live on Deep Space Nine as they have lots of space. And Jadzia knows that Cassidy and Sisko like each other. On Ops, Dukat beams on board for the mission. On a runabout, Dukat and Kira have about 6 hours before they get to the Badlands. Kira is not happy about this. Dukat was he's a war criminal. He's a bad person. Kira explains that on this ship, Dukat needs to heed her command. And Dukat says they're good. Dukat was sent largely because the Ravenok was his ship that he sort of was in control of. Kira explains that she is hoping to find Akram, her friend. Akram was Kira's resistance leader who got her into the resistance and sort of helped create the freedom fighter who Kira is. And, Dukat says Kira is a Bajoran born out of the ashes of the revolution, a Cardassian tempered steel warrior. And Kira's like, shut up. Dukat offers that Bajor is stronger due to the occupation, sort of occupation apologism. And while Cardassian may have been a little brutal, Dukat believes that Cardassia will be allies and one day friends with Bajor. Kira says, maybe, but I hate you. Please shut up. And Dukat agrees to shut up. We see Cassidy and Sisko having a dinner date. Sisko makes food. That's sort of the thing that he does. His father is a chef in New Orleans. Cassidy was offered the job, and Sisko is being sheepish, nervous, aloof. He's not being enthusiastic, according to Cassie. He says, he says something that's not very popular. And Cassidy thinks Sisko is afraid of commitment and is upset and feels Sisko doesn't want her. She leaves dinner.
A note to our listeners. If you love the Southpaw Project, please support us and help us get paid for our labor by financially supporting us on Patreon. This will give you access to exclusive bonus content, like early releases of Southpaw Deep Space Nine, our fictional narrative podcast, Fighters Brew, break-free versions of our shows without interruptions like you're hearing now, bonus articles, Fighters Brew transcripts with extra content, Liberation Martial Arts Online, as well as our private chat group on Discord. You can also make one-time donations at Ko-Fi or show your solidarity by wearing our swag. You can find all pertinent links at southpawpod.com.
At the Badlands, Dukat and Kira scan the debris. Dukat and Karm talk a lot of crap to each other. The Maquis would like Dukat, and Dukat would like Karm. Karm reminds all that Dukat is pretty much a war criminal. The debris was found on the Desarius system, where there is an M-class planet, or as they say, an M-ish class planet. Kira does not understand why the Ravenok is so far away. The planet is rough to land. They go for a manual land on this hot, dry planet. As we know, Bajorans, for the most part, don't really like dry heat. The Cardassians do. The squad finds the Ravenok in pieces. Then we see Jadzia, Bashir, and Sisko have drinks and agree that Sisko fumbled the bag. Jadzia thinks Sisko needs to explain that he is sorry, and Quark gives terrible advice. Sisko isn't sure how to feel. Jadzia and Bashir agree it's a big step, and that was the thing that Sisko said in response to Cassidy moving. He said, that's a big step. Back on the Ravenok, it appears that there was a firefight. They see 12 graves buried by rock. Dukat needs to survey the bodies, and for the spirituality of the Cardassians, it is important to handle bodies in a certain way, where Bajorans are like, your soul isn't in the bodies. You can do it wherever you want. But Kira's like, let me know about the earrings, because each family has a different earring, so she can sort of identify who's there. On the Ravenok, Kira looks. Dukat finds the bodies. He's upset. Tora is the person that he finds. She was Dukat's friend and Bajoran mistress. Dukat says it was real love. Kira is dubious, sort of points out the power dynamics involved in that sort of relationship, and that in the ground, both Cardassians and Bajorans are buried, and her buddy isn't in the burials. And it's clear that 2 battleships must have blasted the Ravenok. But Kira is like, well, all Bajorans that were rebels in the occupation had isotopes implanted in their bodies for them to be found if lost. So she can find him. Kira and Dukat go to look for them. They take a rest. Dukat sits on a spike. Comedy ensues. Kira gives him a skin regenerator. They laugh. Kira asks about a Cardassian on the logbook, Zayal. Dukat is her father. He hopes she is not alive, as he will have to kill her, as her existence as being a daughter outside of marriage. He is married with many kids, and she's half Bajoran. So he's like, I'm going to kill her. Kira says, that's not going to happen. And Kira says that she'll take care of Zayal, and Dukat is like, believes that Dukat sent them on the ship to save them. But Dukat explains that, and we've seen it a little bit before, basically like Bajoran Cardassian children aren't treated well by either groups. It's not a good experience. And Kira's like, no. On Deep Space Nine, Sisko sees his son, Jacob. Jacob ran into Cassidy. She tells him she's not going to take the job because Ben doesn't want her to take it. Ben says it's complicated. Jake says it's not. Ben feels pressure to make sure things are okay and worries if it doesn't work out, it's his fault. And Jake is like, you have to try. It's okay. What's the worst that could happen? You have to take risks to live life. And all of this was figured out with Nog's help, with much to Ben's chagrin. On the desert planet, they find the Breen. They're a race of aliens that have been up to this point have been talked about, but have never been seen before. They wear these helmets. We don't know what's under the helmets. It's a dilithium mine, and they're using the survivors to get the resources out of the mine. And Zayal is there, and they have to rescue him. And Kira's like, I will kill you, Dukat, if you hurt her. And Akram is revealed to have died. The prisoners are confused why Dukat is there. And Kira explains that the war is over and they're super hyped. They take over the Breen. Dukat finds Zayal and puts out his gun. And Zayal was told by the Cardassian prisoners that she would die at his hands, and is disappointed, as all that kept her alive is her love for her father. And she accepts her fate and is like, look, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it. But Dukat can't do it. And he embraces her. On Deep Space Nine, Sisko comes to Cassidy and asks her to take the job and wants her to take the job. Ben apologizes. He was very happy, but translated his excitement through being nervous. He hasn't been in a serious relationship in a lot of time and didn't expect such. He thought he was going to be single for a while until he met Cassidy. And he doesn't want Cassidy to get hurt like his wife. He feels sort of responsible for the death of, Jake's mother. Cassidy reveals that she already took the job. She wasn't going to give up the opportunity because of him. That was her ambition. It's a good job. And he's an idiot. And they're going to be all right. And yeah, they just talk about making plans Jadzia asks Kira about the trip and they see Dukat. Dukat thanks her. He's going to bring Zayel back to Cardassia, knowing full well that it'll mess up his reputation, and he doesn't care.
So, this is a very odd episode for me. I don't even know if I like it. There's an 80s movie called Enemy Mine. And this episode was basically that movie, including the rescue of a child in the mine.
Don't you dare try to compare that to Enemy Mine. Enemy Mine is a classic. Enemy Mine is an awesome 80s film that I have always wished they would remake it to like a short series. It is awesome.
This is a ripoff. This is a bad ripoff.
I don't even see it. I don't think so. You're allowed to have that opinion. I disagree, but I'm glad you talked about that movie.
So even the high concept that was interesting, I had seen before, but the execution wasn't all that great, though I did like the acting quite a bit, especially by Dukat and Kira. If you love the Southpaw Project, become one of our financial supporters. It'll help us supplement the cost of running this project, the incredible time and energy we put into it 7 days a week, and you'll be giving us some breathing room, not only to juggle Southpaw with our day jobs, but also to expand Southpaw into other areas. We can't exist without your contributions. Show your Southpaw solidarity by supporting us at southpawpod.com. You have Dukat early on saying colonialism was good, actually, which you still hear today. Even if you don't hear that explicitly, that's the foundation of the West. Their pride in themselves comes from believing colonialism is ultimately good and made the modern world and the world westernized. This is the underlying argument for every Western government and the basis for why they are our moral authorities. They became moral authorities as colonizers, and that never changed. But Western liberals who can write this stuff or even point out this contradiction lack the self-awareness to apply it to themselves. Even if they think they're calling out the US or the West, it lacks any conviction or any depth because they don't really think about what that really means. Or if you really meant it, what should be the logical consequence or conclusion of that belief? They call out stuff about conservatives without any self-awareness that the stuff they are saying also applies to them. This plays into this episode where you have a colonizer and colonized becoming the odd couple. Lots of oddness, right? Then you add in some Romeo and Juliet with Dukat and one of his enslaved prisoners. It's like a political writing salad only liberals can conjure, but it plays to that liberal message that we should all get along, white supremacists and the people they victimize. I can't even call this childish because it insults children, but it's non-materialist and completely gaslights and ignores harm and damage. So going back to Glazer's speech and the response to that speech, Glazer is saying both sides have done wrong and it needs to stop. And the people denouncing him are saying the press should have just gotten along like the odd couple rather than resist. This episode plays into all of that, all the different variations of centrism. The line between centrism and fascism is none, which goes to Dukat's actions and Bear seemingly resembling Dukat without the redemption arc at the end of this episode. We go from the odd couple and just the difference in opinions, centrism, to Dukat wanting to kill his own daughter. Just odd writing. Centrism and fascism is all a blur. It's as mystifying from a writing perspective as Bear supporting Israel. I guess it made sense to Bear. Then he, Dukat, quickly changed his mind to save his daughter. It was forced. They had plot points they had to hit, and rather than take us there with writing, they just shoehorned those points in. But I guess it needed that happy ending, which is more a feature of Hollywood than real life or Hollywood people in real life. The episode felt like liberal propaganda. There was the making of a conversation about how capitalism makes parents put career over kids. But that conversation never really materialized. But I'll just make that point. Capitalism turns loss of parents into little Dukats with their children. Capitalism subsumes all our behaviors and doesn't make any positive contribution to people being more humane to each other. Full stop. I like to think I'm a good parent, but I can guarantee I'd be an even better parent without capitalism, without the time constraints, without the worry of money. I do a lot of gentle parenting, but based on time constraints is really hard because a lot of it is about being patient, but capitalism doesn't allow for patience. One of my friends calls it villain time, where you're always on the villain's time schedule, and that villain being capitalism. Full stop. That's it. What I did like about this episode was the acting, and I am a sucker for mushy moments. So I guess for me, this episode lacks substance, but it did have some feels, and I definitely had some feels. That might be a flaw of mine. Scott, what did you think, and how did you rate this?
So this episode is important because it introduces us to Zayal. She is important in the story. I don't know if I can. I mean, she. This isn't a one and done for her. She shows up, and she's an incredible character. And I don't want to say too much, aside from that. The episode's cool because we're introduced to Zayal, and we finally see the Breen, and there's some very good acting, but trying to have like Kira and Dukat be buddy doesn't really work for me.
It did not work.
I do see how people might be friendly with each other or courteous on a ship, but I just don't really see it. And you can't get me to think that Dukat is a good guy. And I wonder, so let me ask you a question. What do you think of Dukat right now after this episode?
Well, here's the thing, right? Intellectually, he's evil and I shouldn't like him, right? But this is also media. So a lot of how I feel, a lot of people, how viewers feel is manipulated. They're manipulating it with writing. And there's been moments, especially in this episode, but he had a lot of moments also with Cisco, where it's just like kind of friendly, like we hate each other, but we don't. We respect each other, kind of like banter that's meant to be funny and kind of like charming. So yeah, I do feel manipulated to somewhat liking him, right? Especially in this episode. It's not even that he felt more three-dimensional, because he always felt three-dimensional, but it felt like, in pro wrestling terms, right? He was written like a face. And there's been other times where he's been kind of written like a face, like almost like a Stone Cold, like heelish face kind of character, right? Where it's like the baddish guy that you're supposed to sort of like, the bad boy kind of thing. But this episode, definitely he was written like a face. So if I think about it, I don't like him, but while watching it, were there moments I liked them? Of course. I think that's what they wanted.
Remember that.
Huh.
But I give the episode like a 3. It really didn't do it for me. It really upset me. I didn't enjoy watching it. I think about giving it more just because of mythology, but I just think it's not that great of an episode.
Scott, can you tell us about the next episode?
Let's just say that Jadzia gets a blast from the past.
Until then,